doing it. There you go. All right. So hi everybody, it's Allison here. And so this is going to be the first starting piece for our speaker series, is that Mums at Work is going to be partnering with the Vanier Institute. And today we have Nora Spinks, who is going to tell us a little bit about her, a little bit about what they do, and share some information. Hi, Nora.
Hi, nice to see you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit, so a lot of people are not familiar with the work that the Vanier Institute does, so why don't we start there and you can tell us a little bit about what you do and how you do it.
Sure. So the Vanier Institute of the Family is a research education organization that was set up in 1965 by the then Governor General Georges Vanier and his wife, Pauline.
Okay.
And what they did, it was the 60s, so things were crazy, things were wild, they were worried about families and instability, and so they decided that they would set up, first of all, they held a conference,
okay,
and they brought together people from all across the country to Rideau Hall for a conference, and the output of that conference was the creation of the Institute.
Okay.
And the Institute was established at that time as a royal standing commission that should never be discharged, for the purpose of research and education, so that we could understand families, family life, family experiences, and share that with people who would benefit from that. So the way we phrase that now is anybody who studies, serves, supports families, or people who fund those that do.
Correct.
So study is the academics, the researchers, the pollsters, Statistics Canada, anybody who researches or studies families. Anybody who serves families, that's all governments, municipal, federal, provincial, anybody who's in service to families, so public policies, public programs. And then those who support are all the nonprofit, the childcare programs, the shelters, the food banks, anybody who supports families. And those who fund might be foundations or governments or different organizations that finance those who study, serve, and support. So what we do now is we have a variety of initiatives that we are involved in. So we held the second ever National Conference on the Family in 2015.
Okay.
So from 65 to 2015, there were zero. There were lots of conferences on childcare and family violence and family functioning and family law, but none sort of writ large on families. So we did that in 2015. And we did the third one in 2019. And coming out of the conference in 2019, in the spirit of the Vaniers, we wanted to have a legacy. We wanted to not just have a one and done, but a legacy. And we have three things that come out of that national conference. And when I say national conference, it was actually a synchronous and asynchronous multi-site pan-Canadian event. So we had the main event in Ottawa, and we had, I think it was 8 simultaneous across the country. And then we had multiple asynchronous after that. And we, like we did in 2015, the conference was actually a culmination of activities that had taken place in the country a couple of years leading up to that. So we, on a regular basis, we've been holding what we call listening tours, where we go coast to coast to coast, and we meet with families to understand what they're experiencing, what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, in order to gather information that from voices that aren't often heard.
Right.
So families affected by incarceration, families in shelters. We spoke to kids from kindergarten to centenarians and everything in between. We've gone to schools and high schools and colleges and universities, and we didn't just go to family studies. We went to economics, we went to law, we went to medicine. We also went to families who were new to Canada, families who've been here for time in memoriam, Indigenous families across the country, multi-generational households. We actually went and hung out with some kids under bridges in downtown Toronto and talked to them about family and what family meant to them as a youth living on the street. We met with kids who were transitioning out of the foster care system and into adulthood. We engaged people at LARSH communities across the country, so people with disabilities, and we had them bring a family member outside of LARSH. So it might have been a parent, it might have been a sibling or a cousin, so they were all a part of it. We spoke to people from the military, from first responders, so families with very diverse experiences. We met with people from the private sector in HR, in benefits, in management, CEO circles, and organizations. And the first thing we asked them was to complete the phrase "family is" in one word.
Right.
And so they were allowed to give us up to 3, but it could only be one word at a time. So family is what? So if I were to ask you to complete the phrase "family is" in one word, what's the first word that just pops to your mind?
Safety.
Safety. Safety came up a lot,
Yep.
in particular with young adolescents.
Right.
So from 13 to 23
right.
was very much safety, security, stability. It was the rock. Right. Give me another one. Family is.
Oh, that was going to be my next one. It was, well, I'd say like the word is there. Like family is like, for me, it's there, right? Like that's a strange word, but that's the first one that comes to mind, right?
So what we did then is we put each group responses into a word cloud.
Okay.
And then we started to roll it all up to see what we were aiming for was to determine how did people think differently about families if they had just left their families in another country, were reuniting with the family in this country, if they were an adolescent or a senior. And we wanted to know what was different about each of these perspectives. So seniors were the only ones that said things like family is legacy.
Okay.
Family is history. Family is roots.
Right.
Adolescents, whether you were on the street or whether you came from wealthy families or whether you were indigenous families, family is annoying, family is frustrating. Yep. We didn't get that from anywhere else. From the little wee ones, kindergarten, we got a lot of family is mom, family is dad.
Right.
So very structural, sort of concrete operations, totally understandable. The only ones that we got family as dependents was benefits managers. Again, not a surprise.
As someone who works in benefits, that's hilarious.
Right. We got family is unpredictable from first responders, from police officers. Family is wherever, from military. So there were a couple of things that were very unique, but the top 3 answers were the same everywhere.
Right.
Every community, every geography, cities, urban, suburban, ex-urban, low income, high income, kindergarten through to seniors, new to Canada, been here forever. Yeah. Family is love. Okay. Family is care and support.
All right.
And family is connection. Okay.
Yeah.
So very much along the lines of what you just said. They're there, they're connected. We didn't get any sort of predetermined definition of what a family must look like.
Right.
And we were expecting that when we went to LGBTQ youth and LGBTQ seniors, looking at different perspectives, what did they think about family? Same thing. The kids who were living on the street were the only ones, and in particular, kids who were living on the street from the LGBTQ community said family is chosen, which I thought was very interesting. Yep. Although there are other groups that said chosen, but not to the same intensity or the same degree. Right. So what we do with all of this information is we analyze it in a number of different ways. We conduct research, we work with people who study, serve, and support families. Okay. So we gather data from academics. We partner very closely with Statistics Canada,
Mhm.
not only in the collection of data, but the analysis and the interpretation and the dissemination of that data. So the census form that you're all going to get next year in 2021, some of the questions, the nuances of the questions that we've been able to influence and impact dramatically gives us better insight into families. So for example, the Institute's been involved in the history of the language. So back in the 60s and 70s, an adolescent who was a mom would be an unwed mother.
Right.
And then it became a lone parent. And now we're talking about whether you're a solo parent, a co-parent, or a lead parent.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what your marital status is. It doesn't matter what your relationship status is. You can be a solo, lead, or co-parent regardless.
Right.
So we're able to do that. The other thing that we do is we take all of this information and we take it from sort of one sector to another.
Right.
So we'll sit down with HR professionals and find out what the struggles they're having with supporting their employees who are working remotely or who are struggling with feeling a sense of belonging. And we'll take that information to researchers and academics and say, go collect the data.
Right.
And then we take that information and then we take it back to the HR community.
Excellent.
And we say, this is what other organizations are doing. This is what's happening. So that circles me back to the three outputs coming out of the 2019 conference, which are, the first is a policy monitor, which we're basically sort of evolving into this knowledge hub. And that policy monitor basically is a one-stop, quick access, who's doing what, where. And right now it's public policy and primarily at the federal level. So there's a whole section on COVID and every policy program benefit that's available, and that's updated daily.
Right.
But the intent is to include programs.
Right.
So if you're sitting on a board of directors or you've got an idea or you're wondering, what's the emerging thinking or the leading practices around supporting homeless youth, then you could just click on there, find out who's doing what across the country.
Makes sense.
And then you don't have to start with a blank slate necessarily.
Right.
And if you do start with a blank slate, you've got something really cool that you're developing or you're building, then you could let us know, and then we can transmit that information across the country. So we do a lot of knowledge generation, knowledge interpretation, knowledge mobilization, but then knowledge activation.
Right.
So then we take that information to those who either fund or make policy. So like with COVID, we've been very involved in helping different levels of government understand the kinds of programs that families would benefit best from, so that as they're crafting their interventions, or even just coming up with their thinking,
right,
it's important for them to have this knowledge and understanding. So that's the first one, is the policy monitor. The second is a family well-being index. Now, we have heard a lot about well-being, but most of the well-being indices are individual based. So we've got a really good index on the well-being of children and youth that UNICEF has developed. We've got a really good one with primarily adults or individuals that the University of Waterloo is doing, with veterans that Veterans Affairs is doing, but nobody's sort of looking at holistically the family. The one that's coming out of the Indigenous community is probably the closest, but what we're trying to do is to come up with a constellation of metrics, because we know that family well-being isn't simply sort of the combination of all the individual well-being to produce a family well-being. So for example, you can have 5 people in a family across maybe 3 generations, and say 2 or 3 of them, their well-being might be ranked at a 4 out of 5, and a couple others might be a 1 out of 5, but the family as a whole unit may be a 5 out of 5, because they've got the resources, the support, the access to community programs that allow them to either maintain or get better. So, the well-being index is a really important one. And the third one is a consortium.
Right.
So this is where we bring all these people together who are either knowledge producers or knowledge users, so that we can have evidence-informed decisions, whether it's in the workplace or in the community or even in the marketplace, where we can have evidence-based programs and policies, and where we can have evidence-inspired innovation. And so that's sort of the what, so what, now what,
right,
of the Vanier Institute.
And I will jump in to say that so all of the things that you had mentioned, so for all of you watching, Mums at Work is almost 6,000 Canadian, parents now. And it was important for me to partner us with someone who is not just focusing on specific voices, right? But especially voices that are not often heard, especially for respecting the fact that our families all look different, and that's being respected, and that's being, pushed to the forefront, right? Yeah. Because you are the activators in the research for making our voices heard. And the things that I'm hearing from our group is the absolute frustration of, and it's happening over and over and over again, especially during COVID. It's the number one thing that was said to me is like, I'm not feeling heard. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. And there's very little. And the part I like about what you do is that the Vanier Institute has been doing this research for years before COVID. So we have a pre-COVID, post-COVID view of things, which is extremely important. And I was saying there's been all these articles coming out that saying, working mothers are working so many more hours. And the response from our group is like, yeah, we know. What are you going to do about it? So it's about moving those pieces forward. And for everybody who's watching, that's when I reached out to Nora and she told me about, so the policy monitor as an HR person, and I think at this point we have over 500 HR people in our group, is an exciting piece because it's so difficult to know what other people are doing. It's so frustrating for everybody to start at the bottom. If you're building something amazing, how do you make it even more amazing, and how does somebody else reproduce that? And in terms of a knowledge consortium, I have always talked about, our group is being impacted, right? On from childcare to job loss to all sorts of things. And this knowledge consortium can help our voices be heard, right? That's with a lot of the people you work with. This is a space where voices are heard. So for everybody who's watching that, this is why we're doing it this way. This is why we're not doing it, piece by piece by piece. It's this way we can approach things and be heard on different levels, especially partnering with someone who works with so many different institutions, from research to government to wherever, right?
Yeah, and what I think is really interesting, and what's really great about the partnership between the Institute and Moms at Work is that we also collect the stories behind the stats. Right. So yesterday was World Statistics Day. So I had the opportunity to speak at a conference of all the senior researchers across the country. And one of the things I really emphasized was the importance of remembering that every single number, every single dot on that trend line is a human being.
Right.
Is a parent, is a caregiver, is a friend, is a neighbor, is a provider, is an HR professional, is an employee or an employer or manager. And remember that every one of those dots, every one of those percentage points is a human experience, a human being, a human perspective, a human opportunity, if we understand it properly. Right. And I think what's really important about the data we're collecting during COVID, and we've been doing week over week polling since March 15th, and working with StatsCan on crowdsourcing and panel research and a whole range of data collection tools. And the thing that's come really clear is from the beginning that every system since COVID has been tested, and every strength of every system has been magnified, amplified, intensified. Generosity, gratitude, flexibility, remote, you know, we've responded, we've reacted, we've adapted. Strength amplified. Equally the weaknesses. So we knew that there were weaknesses in the long-term care system, and COVID magnified them, amplified them, intensified them. And now we have the opportunity to say, okay, now that this has been magnified, and it's not just a small subset of the population who happens to be living in, working in, or having a loved one in a long-term care facility that's aware of the weaknesses, the whole country is. And now we can act and be proactive as well as reactive. So it's those kinds of experiences. And all the data that we're collecting during COVID, we're trying to use the same questions exactly the way we've done in the general social survey on families and caregiving and victimization in previous years, and the census, of course, so that we can do direct comparisons. Pre-COVID, phase 1 COVID, and we're talking phase 1 as being sort of March to September, and then phase 2 being September to probably February or March, we're thinking, by the time second wave and things start to turn around and we start moving into the next phase. But we also want to document the experiences people are having in 2020, 2021, so that if this happens again in 2050 or 2100, that they'll be able to go back to this data and this information and these solutions and strategies the way we're looking back on 1918.
Right.
And so it's important for us to get your stories and to document how people are responding and reacting.
Right.
So what are the things that your employer is doing to assist you to fulfill your multiple responsibilities at home and at work? What are they not doing? What do you need them to do that they're not? But we're also, so that's sort of the picture of it, but we're also looking at the infrastructure around it. So what's happening with the duty to accommodate due to family status?
Right. Big
when
one.
You're working remotely.
Big one. Yep.
Huge. What's happening with custody orders for parents who have a plan pre-COVID and say they were going to do 50-50 sharing, but one parent is in a high rise with, unpredictable Wi-Fi, and the other parent has got a backyard and steady Wi-Fi and, a big neighborhood to wander around in. Then we have to change the arrangement.
Right.
So how does that work? And even things like remote working, it's not like remote working is brand new.
No.
I actually had before I was at the Institute, I did consulting on work family and worked with HR professionals on creating, for 10 years worked with employees on how to manage work and family, and then 10 years with HR professionals on policies, programs, practices, and then the last 5 years in that consulting practices, mostly working with the C-suite. How do you create cultures that can optimize those policies and programs? And so I got a call from a former client who said, I found this manager training on how to manage a remote workforce in our file. Do you mind if we use the content? And I said, absolutely, of course. So 1991, we were training managers on how to support a diversified workforce, a remote workforce, a distributed workforce. And we were doing, so we've got a lot of data. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. Okay. We know what some of the issues are. And now we just have to lay COVID on top of that and continue on that learning.
Okay. So we're going to wrap up, but I want people to, so a few of the things that we're doing is that the Vanier Institute is sharing with me, and I'm sharing with our entire group, links to surveys, how we can participate. You did a great one on like birthing professionals that we shared to share their experiences. So we're going to continue to do those and send those out in the newsletter and in the group. The Vanier Institute is a registered charity. They will give tax receipts for, what's the number? Is it $10, $20?
We'll do it for 10.
Okay, whatever. So for all of our upcoming speaker series, you'll see on the page, there's a donation button, clicks right straight to their Canada Helps page. You can get, so you can get your tax receipts. I didn't want to be the holder of the like tax advantage here. So you can do that individually. You will see on the Moms at Work main website, there is a link on our main page, the Vanier Institute. You can donate there as well. And then there is also going to be a button link within the Facebook group where you can donate. So look for all of those places to do that. We're doing many free events like the speaker series. Our speakers are coming on understanding that they're doing this, and people watching will be donating. So thank you to all of those people. And we'll get, I will ask Nora for some updates on some of the things that are happening and how you can get involved with things like the policy monitor and the consortium, and how to get our voices heard. So thank you so much for taking the time. Your background looks way better than mine. I got to get one of those Zoom backgrounds, but I'm sure we will touch base again soon, and I can't wait to see where these go.
Well, it was my absolute pleasure, and we are thrilled to be partnering with Moms at Work. And I'll just leave you with 3 thoughts.
Sure, yeah.
1, you're not alone.
Okay.
2, we'll get through this. And 3, there's help out there if you need it.
Right. Great. So look for all those links, everybody, buttons. And if you have any questions for me or for Nora, you can reach out to me. Everybody knows how to get in touch with me. And everybody have a fantastic afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you much. Bye-bye, everybody.